Okay, so hello everyone. You're all very welcome to tonight's information webinar. My name is Michael and I work in AsIAm as part of the Legal Policy and Information Line team. I'm also joined on the call this evening by my colleague, Niamh Mellerick. Tonight's webinar is part of a series of webinars where AsIAm hosts an external agency to provide insights on what they do to support and assist families and individuals. Tonight's webinar is with the National Council for Special Education, and tonight's presenters will look at the role of the NCSE, the role of the SENO, and I suppose a particular focus of tonight will be looking at the recently published circular 0080 2024, which focuses on, quote, forward planning for special education provision, unquote. We're joined this evening by Sarah Ledwidge and Stephanie Kelly, who are both the national coordinators of local services with the National Council for Special Education since April 2024, and they'll give you a little bit more information as to themselves in a few moments. Tonight's webinar is for you as parents to get a sense of the role and the remit of the NCSE and the aforementioned circular. It's also an evening for you as parents and guardians to know what to expect from your SENO as you navigate your child's educational journey. Tonight's session is also about you asking questions. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we would ask you guys to submit any questions that you have, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible this evening. I suppose it's also important to say that we'd like to ask you to refrain from asking any questions which identify our child or school. Tonight's particular focus is on you as parents or guardians understanding the role of the NCSE and the circular, but please do ask questions in relation to either in the Q&A box. If you do have any questions of an advocacy nature, my colleague Niamh will share with you how you can bring these issues to our attention at AsIAm. Tonight's session will also be recorded, as I said from the outset, but also will be available on our YouTube channel in the next day or so. So without further ado, then I'm going to introduce our speakers tonight. As I said, we have Stephanie Kelly and Sarah Ledwidge. And Sarah, if you would like to introduce yourself to our attendees tonight.
Yes, of course. Hi everybody. I'm delighted to be here this evening. I'm Sarah Ledwidge. I am the national coordinator for the eastern half of the country, and when we move to start working through our presentation here, I'll clarify exactly what counties that includes. I have been national coordinator with NCSE, as Michael said, since April of this year, and previous to that, I was a team manager also with NCSE for South Dublin. I suppose prior to working for NCSE, I've worked across disability services, working with children and young people and adults with autism, with intellectual disabilities, and in working to support those children, young people, and adults in any way that I could. I am also a Montessori trained primary teacher, so I have a lot of context and understanding of the education system as well. I'll let Stephanie introduce herself now.
Hi everybody, my name is Stephanie Kelly. Same as Sarah, I'm National Coordinator with the NCSE since last April. Prior to that, since 2020, I worked with the NCSE as an advisor on their autism, behaviour for learning and inclusion team. So within that role, I supported teachers in schools in the areas of autism, behaviour for learning, and I suppose meeting the needs of children across the school. I'm primary school teacher, was teaching in County Leitrim for 18 years before I went into the NCSE, and was a principal and deputy principal of a school in North Leitrim. So that's me.
Okay, so I suppose we'll just get started and start working through our presentation here. If it will change for me. Okay, so I suppose just to flag with everybody that we are happy, we want to, I suppose, set out our intentions for the learning environment here this evening. And I suppose when it comes to these three areas in particular, so insofar as self-regulation, we have no issue at all with people moving around, sitting or standing, having their camera on and off. I actually don't think you have you are able to turn your camera on, but eating or drinking, fidgeting, taking a break, whatever you need to do, just please feel free to go ahead and do it. In respect of access to the slides that we are presenting on this evening, we have our projected slide here, and we'll also share our slides afterwards with AsIAm so that they can provide them to you if you want to see them that way as well. And then I suppose just in respect of what you can do this evening is please do ask us questions. After this evening, you can contact your local SENO for further support or information. And you can also feel free to email myself and or Stephanie. We've already introduced ourselves, but I might just let Stephanie here speak to her area.
Yeah, so just there's 2 regions within the NCSE. Region 1, which is Sarah, Region 2, which is myself. They are the counties, the 13 counties that I am national coordinator for. So I suppose our full title is National Coordinator for Local Service. So within our roles, we are, I suppose, have oversight of frontline service to school. So that's your SENO, that's your visiting teacher, that's your advisor, that's going in to support schools and to support you and your family. So if you're living in one of them counties and you want to reach out to me in relation to your engagement with the NCSE or seeking support, my email address is there.
Thanks, Stephanie. And then I suppose this is my region, as Stephanie indicated, I'm Region 1. So those are the counties there that come under my remit. And similarly, if you're living in those counties and you have any queries or if there's anything that I can be of support with, my email address is there as well. We'll make sure that you know how to access the information in respect of who your local SENO is this evening as well, just so that you have that information also. But I'm happy to receive emails if there's any questions as well. So we just wanted to outline our goals for this session, and we'd encourage you as well to think about what your own personal goal for the session is. Our goals this evening are to outline NCSE regional teams and the SENO links, how NCSE can support parents and guardians, the role of school staff in supporting your child, and then to chat through the recent circular 80/2024 supporting forward planning for special education provision, and then to make sure that we leave time for you to ask questions as well. So I suppose just to briefly talk through the NCSE structure. So as you can see on the map on the right-hand side of your screen, the orange and blue map, this outlines the 2 different regions. Stephanie's regions are the counties coloured in orange, and mine are the counties coloured in blue. We largely are split east and west, with the slight anomaly of my having Leitrim. And then the map on your left just outlines the areas that are managed by team managers. So, for example, you can see here in Dublin there are 4 team managers. There are 2 team managers in North Dublin, 2 team managers in South Dublin, whereas that's I suppose in part due to the population in Dublin and the demand for our services in Dublin, and then say in counties where the population is smaller or where there isn't as much demand, we have 1 team manager managing across 3 counties. Myself and Stephanie manage the team managers. We manage 10 team managers each, and the team managers then respectively have a team of SENOs, advisors, and visiting teachers on their teams. And I suppose those teams then are the frontline service teams supporting families and schools with NCSE services. So, sorry, excuse me. We just wanted to highlight here, you'll find these 2 tiles. They were on our homepage for a while, but they've just been moved off our homepage now to make the the link to the new circular process front and center for parents, but you'll find these when you log on to our homepage under parents. You'll find under that tab, there's a section for Contact My SENO. And when you click into that, this will come up and you can click in there and find the SENO for your area. We have recently restructured the NCSE, and when we did that earlier this year, what we tried to do was to make it as easy as possible for parents and families to identify the SENO that works within their area and therefore is the most appropriate SENO for you to contact. So when you log into that, it brings you to a PDF, and beside each SENO's caseload, there's a little bit of a descriptor about what areas are covered. I suppose it's particularly useful where there's more than one SENO in a county. So in Dublin, we have 28 SENOs. So there's an indication beside each SENO's name as to what areas that SENO covers. And then I suppose there is another list that is available on the website. It's more focused on schools. So it's done by schools roll number. It's not going to be as useful for you as parents and families. The best way for you to access or to find out who your local SENO is to go through this tile which says who is the SENO for where I live. So we wanted to talk a little bit about NCSE's service to parents for 2024 and beyond, and we are working to improve our services always. So we're working, I suppose, under what we refer to as continuous improvement in an effort to make sure that we are always keeping up to date and making sure that we're taking on board the feedback that we get, and parents, families, schools, experiences of their engagement with us. So what we have changed, I suppose, and what we are continuing to work on to improve are a number of things. So first and foremost is SENO's having a student caseload. Initially, when the NCSE was established, the SENOs were given a caseload of schools that they supported, and they supported families as and when they were needed to support families. We're shifting that mindset now very much more towards the fact that SENOs have a caseload of schools, yes, but they also have a student caseload of families who will live within their geographical area who need their support as well. So that has been a significant change and hopefully improves our service delivery for families. We have enhanced engagement and it's county-based now. So when we restructured within the NCSE, we have made sure that our SENOs are working on county-based caseloads. So no SENO will have a caseload that stretches across several counties or more than one county. And so it's easier now for families to identify who their SENO is based on the area in which they live. We are currently working on improving and formalising our quality service standards. Stephanie is leading out on that project within NCSE at the moment. And just, I suppose, to give you some insight on how we're doing that, that's involving an awful lot of engagement with schools, with teachers, with principals, and with parents and families alike. So we've been running focus groups with parents and families to establish what it is that means quality to you when you're looking for a service from NCSE. We're looking at and currently trialling a common application system in the Dublin 15 area. The intention being that in the longer term, we try to make the process of applying for class places, especially when they relate to special school or special class, more straightforward and simple for families in that they would apply to one central application, and it would be for a number of schools. That's under trial, as I said, at the moment in Dublin 15 this year. We've also been engaging with the Northern Irish Education Executive in order to learn from them and see how they run their common application system in the hopes that we can move towards that here as soon as is feasibly possible. What we are really working to now as well is for SENOs to be able to build their knowledge of your children as they move through their education. So as part of our restructure, we have reduced our SENOs caseloads. We have increased the amount of time that they have available to be in schools, to support schools, and to be engaging with families. And so it's our hope that they learn more about the children who are within their area, and that they see the progress that those children are making, and that they're part of their progress through the education system over the course of their time in the education system. We're also working towards improving the way in which we approach case resolution, that we make sure that when you come to us for support, even if what you're seeking doesn't fall within our remit, that as much as possible we can direct you to the correct people and just check in to make sure that you have gotten a resolution. If what you come to us with does fall into our remit, then we'll work with you until you are satisfied with the resolution to that. We are also improving on our placement data, on how we work with that placement data and how we plan with that placement data. And again, a big part of that is the circular that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And really what's key to it all is our relationships. We're really focusing on building the relationships that we have with the schools that we support, with the families that we support, so that you can pick up the phone to us and that you'll know you'll get the support that you need, or you'll get pointed into the right direction. And so that schools can reach out to us for the support that they need before things become a huge problem, and so that we can get in and we can provide what we need to provide in order to resolve any issues arising. So I'll just talk briefly to the role of the SENO. I haven't, I suppose there's a lot more to the role of the SENO than is written on this slide, so I'll expand a little bit as I talk through it as well. But I suppose just at a high level overview, SENOs provide information on school placement options and support parents to make an informed decision. So you can contact your local SENO when it's getting time for you to seek a primary age placement or transition to a post-primary age placement, and discuss your school placement options with your SENO. So there's a number of things that come into that and a number of practicalities to consider when we're looking at those things. So one of the things we can do is we can review your child's report to outline what placement options are available to your child. We can support you in seeking an appropriate placement and identifying what schools within the area might be suitable for your child. If your child is seeking a mainstream place, our SENOs can support with the information in respect of the supports that are available within mainstream schools for children. And they can also support you in, I suppose, identifying if you're seeking a specialist placement, be it special school or special class, that they'll support you in identifying schools in your area that may have places available for your child. I suppose traditionally there has been some practice of SENO sending out a list of all schools that have autism classes within the area, and that they still may provide that so that you have a full view of what schools in your area have autism classes, or what special schools are in your area that may be an option for your child. But what we're moving towards now is SENOs providing you with more information in respect of the information that we have regarding, is there places available in that school? Are we looking at additional classes in that area? we might not be able to provide information to you until we reach a certain point in the process of opening additional classes. But as soon as we have that, we will be making sure that your SENO is reaching out to you to provide you with that information that the class is opening, and any information that we can in relation to class placements. We also signpost parents and guardians to appropriate resources and information. So there's a body of information on our website that we have developed for parents and families, so we can provide the links to that area of our website to Michael and Neve at the end, so that you can access that. There's a lot of information there. We can also provide some information on other services that may be able to support you as you seek placement for your child, or that we believe may be useful for you to be aware of as you move through the process of seeking placement for your child. And equally, when your child is placed in school and as they're moving through school, we can provide you information on what schools can provide in respect of support to your child. We can provide you information on I suppose other services that may be required if your child is going through a period of school refusal for any reason, or if there's difficulties within the school, we can provide you with information around all of those things. Equally, we can attend meetings with you as parents and the school if you wish for us to attend. When we attend those meetings, we will be there to provide, I suppose, information and support for both yourselves as parents and for schools on what we can offer in the context of your child's support needs within the school. So I've already talked to supporting you in seeking specialist placement and identifying appropriate schools. And just to reiterate that, it will include updating you on information about additional places that we are creating within the system as they become available. We provide parental information sessions, much like this evening session, in collaboration with other organisations. So you'll often see us with CDNT teams, with early intervention settings, with parent groups. And that, I suppose, allows us to provide parents support at critical times of transition. So they tend to be particularly relating to getting ready to transition from early years into primary school, or getting ready to transition from primary school into post-primary school. So we do provide all of those sessions, I suppose, broadly with other organisations, but equally you can contact us directly and we can provide you with the same information as well. We also gather information to support special class planning. We've been doing that for a number of years now. I suppose what the new circular that we're going to talk to towards the end of this presentation does is it supports us in doing that more formally. It also supports us in ensuring that we are aware of as many families and children seeking specialist placement as is possible. I suppose a flaw in the system prior to the circular was that we weren't always aware of every child who was seeking a school place, and the parents who contacted us, we knew about, and we had, I suppose, an idea of the demand that we had based on those families that had contacted us. We always added 30 to 50% additional to that figure as the number of children who were seeking school places for the coming year. And oftentimes we were still left in a position where the demand was higher than that again. And so with the new circular, it helps us and supports us in gathering more information in order to support our special class planning. We also work really closely with the Department of Education in respect of that. So the Department of Education, myself and Stephanie meet weekly. And in those meetings, we discuss what we are seeing in respect of the numbers of children and families on a county basis who are seeking specialist provision. We also discuss information relating to schools and what schools might have what space available so that we can engage the schools in progressing towards opening additional class places as they're required. So there's an intense and ongoing engagement with the Department of Education in order to support that special class planning. Ultimately, though, your engagement with the SENO, what you get from the SENO, I suppose, is the information in respect of where the classes are currently available, where places are currently available, and then as we become definite in the sanctioning and opening of additional classes with that information as well. Our SENOs also support schools. So our SENOs will regularly be in contact with their schools on their caseloads. There's a number of things that they support schools with. They'll support schools with information on how to assign SNA support, with information on how to apply for additional SNA support. They will provide the school with information on some of our other services that can be of support to the schools, such as our advisor service and our visiting teacher services. So our SENOs can be heavily involved with schools. We also, I suppose, provide information to schools in respect of the provision of autism classes and how they can go about progressing towards opening an autism class, and the supports that are available and the training that's available to schools in order to do that. So I suppose the role of the SENO is quite a significant one, but ultimately they are a frontline service there to support you as parents and to support schools as your child moves through the education system. When it comes to the support that you need, as I said, you can reach out to the SENO. Where it does fall into their role, they will be more than happy to help you and to support you in any way that they can. If it doesn't, then we're moving towards making sure that all SENOs are going to provide you with information on where you can find the support you need, be that through another service or directly with the school. So we'll do our best to guide you in any way that we can when you contact us. So we're just going to, I'm going to hand you over to Stephanie now, who's just going to talk you through, I suppose, the role of some of the school staff within your child's school and how we can work together with them to support your child.
Okay, so I suppose Sarah had talked there at length about the role of the SENO, and prior, I suppose, to 2017, the SENO would have allocated resource hours, as they were called at that time, for a child with a diagnosis. So for an autistic learner prior to 2017, they would have had 4.25, I think it was, hours a week. And that was linked to the diagnosis and not linked to the needs of the child. So it was very much a diagnosis-led model instead of a needs-based model. So at that time, then the department brought out a new circular, and they changed the model of support, or the allocation of support. So schools were given a bank of hours based on the profile of the school, the identified needs within the school, and them hours then were to be deployed to support the needs of students dependent on their need. So children with the greatest level of need got access to the greatest level of support. So just from within my own school days, there were some autistic learners who had significant identified needs, and they may have been accessing 5, 6, 7, up to 10 hours, it depends, of set support a week if they were in mainstream. Or if they may have been not accessing any, and all their needs may be met within the classroom. So that was, I suppose, would have been the role of the SENO, to allocate hours. Now the system is that schools now decide who gets them hours. If a school, though, believe that they don't have enough hours to meet the needs of the children within their school, they can apply to the NCSE for additional hours. And there is a process where they can come to us, I suppose, state their case as to, right, these are our needs, these are our hours, we believe we don't have the capacity to meet the needs of the children, and additional hours can be allocated. So if your child is in a mainstream class, that's how their hours will be deployed based on their identified need. So they may have if they're getting access to a special education teaching hours, they'll have a support plan. That support plan will be shared with you, and you should be part, I suppose, of the consultation of devising that plan. And the amount of support they get then is based on the targets within that plan. If they're in a special class or in a special school, I suppose the SENO then would be working very closely with that school, if it's a special class, around opening that special class, if there was a need to have a class in a particular area, or if there was to have a second or third class, whatever it might be. And the children that are in that class, there's a set allocation. So there's one teacher for a maximum of for a maximum of 6 children. And then there are 2 SNAs, one for up to 3 children, and then a second one for 4, 5, and 6. But if the school believe that they need additional SNA support, they can apply to the NCSE and directly to the SENO, and they can do what's called a review, an SNA review, if they're in a special class, or if they're in a mainstream and they need additional SNA support as well. So that's where the role of the SENO, I suppose, would come around. That resourcing piece would be around the opening of the special class and around the SNA allocation that the school has. And then the set hours, they're determined by the department, and if a review is needed, the school make direct contact with the NCSE and they can apply for additional hours. I suppose just in relation then to your child accessing SNA support, SNA duties are assigned at the discretion of the principal. So the principal ultimately assigns the SNA hours within the school, and it's the same as the set hours, the special education teaching hours. The principal should assign them, whereas the children with the greatest level of need get access to the greatest level of support. What's really important, I suppose, is that it's focused on supporting the particular care needs of the students and should be monitored on an ongoing basis and modified accordingly. And that's really important, that what your child's needs are today may be greater or less in a year's time. So really important that there's that review process built in to the role of the SNA. And I suppose what's really important as well around that is it's always trying to move your child towards independence. It's always trying to consider, what does my child need now to be able to access the curriculum, to be able to access learning, to be ready to learn. And the SNA can support with that. But you're always thinking, am I doing something for this child that they could do for themselves? Then if the SNA is really important, that that child is has that independence to be able to do that for themselves, or am I doing something for this child that they will be able to do for themselves eventually? So can I teach them to do it or support them with that? Within the school then, I suppose the teacher has primary responsibility for the progress and care of all the students in their class. So while they may have access to SNA support, while they may have access to set hours within the school, if they're in mainstream, the class teacher has ultimate responsibility. Same if they're in a special class. They may have access to SNA support within the special class. They may be going into the mainstream class for inclusion with their peers, inclusion time with their peers, to work and play alongside their peers in the mainstream class. But that their class teacher, their base class teacher, has ultimate responsibility. And the class or subject teacher also has a central role in identifying and responding to pupils with additional needs. So that may be where they're in a post-primary school and they may have a subject teacher. They all then have responsibility around that. With the role of the SET, then I suppose a special education teacher provides additional teaching to children attending mainstream classes with special education needs. Special education teachers use a wide variety of teaching approaches to meet a variety of students' needs. This ensures that children with special educational needs in mainstream education are supported in their education journey. And I suppose the NCSE have a huge role, I suppose, around that teacher professional learning for teachers in mainstream classes, in special classes, special schools and SET. There's over 100 courses that are available from the NCSE around supporting the needs of learners in schools. And what's also available to schools is individual support. So where they're looking for individual support around a particular aspect of their teaching or to meet a particular need, advisors can go out to schools and support with that. So if you want to just go on to the next one, Sarah. I suppose with the role of the SNA, really important that the role that the SNA is working as part of a team. So where you have a support plan for a child, the parent will be involved, the parent or guardian will be involved, there may be external agencies involved, the class teacher, the SNAs, the set if they're in mainstream, and the principal may be involved, but that everybody understands exactly what the role of the SNA is, what is their role in regards to meeting a need, to working towards a target, to ensure that child is included and ready to access learning. So that's really important. They're one person as part of a team who share a common goal for that child. To facilitate the inclusion of students who have care needs in school, and that's really important as well, that the SNA is always there to ensure the child spends the maximum amount of time with their peers in their class, with their peers on the yard, that it would never be the vision, anybody's vision, that the SNA would be there to, I suppose, ensure the child is, or not to ensure, but that may result in the child being excluded. So spending time, outside of the class for long periods, that their role is to support them to be able to access the curriculum and ready to learn where they may have care needs. They may be involved in the student support plan in line with what their caring role is in relation to the child, and they attend to primary care needs and secondary care needs associated tasks if there's capacity to do so. So when we think of primary care needs, I suppose we're thinking about a child that may need toilet and support, a child that may need feeding support, a child that they may have a physical disability and need support with moving through the school building. And then they also then may be there to support around sensory. So I suppose it's really important, I suppose, where a child is getting support for, to support, I suppose, regulation, that the activities that the SNA is supporting the child with, the sensory input that the SNA is supporting the child with, is based on a sensory need, and that it's meeting a sensory need. So really important that, if an SNA is taking a child, just for example, for a movement break, then what's the purpose of that break? What is that going to do to regulate the child? And how do you know that movement break is actually working? So really important around that, where an SNA is supporting around that regulation piece, that it's informed by assessment, it's informed by, I suppose, best practice, and that the needs of the child are considered, because what sensory input one child will need will be very different to the next autistic learner. So really important that the SNA is informed by the class teacher and the set, if the set is involved, around meeting that, working towards that regulation piece, I suppose. I suppose what's really important as well around that SNA access, and around I suppose where the NCSE carry out a review, an SNA review, is that we're very cognizant now to include that pupil voice where we can. And while they don't work directly with pupils, that pupil voice is gathered by school staff. So I suppose just to be really important around when a child is working with an SNA or a set within a school, or within their mainstream class or special class, special school placement, that their opinion is very important, that their student voice is heard. And I suppose sometimes when we think about student voice, we think that it's what a child actually tells us, but it's not. It's what we observe, it's what we see, how we see the child interact with the environment, it's what we see piques their attention, it's what we see motivates them. So within my classroom, if I see a child in my class and as soon as I take out Lego, their interest peaks, then that's student voice telling me this child is motivated by Lego. How can I build in Lego into the learning environment for them? So it's really important that that student voice is captured. My school will seek to understand my need. And I suppose that's what Sarah referenced earlier around the role of the SENO and getting to know the children, that before, I suppose, the caseloads were reduced, where we went from just over 60 to 120 SENOs across the country. a lot of SENOs didn't have the capacity to really get to know the children. That now what we want is that they're out there in schools working with school staff to really understand the needs of the children. So the school will be bringing that to the NCSE. The school then will match the need to the right intervention. I suppose that's really important as well when we talk about employing set hours or employing SNA support. Is it matched to the right intervention? I have helped to set my targets and where that's appropriate. A child should always be given input into the targets. The targets are designed so I become as independent as possible, as early as possible. And I suppose that's always what we're thinking around all of our learners. Am I using the staff and the resources and the interventions in my school to move a child towards independence, or am I actually moving them away from independence? Really important to consider that, because I won't have SNA support forever. This will depend on my identified needs and how long will I need it. I may need to the whole of my school system, but I may not. It's that the child is forever changing, and that'll depend on the identified needs. My school know what I can do for myself, as we talked about that independence piece, and I receive support according to my need. And that's going back to the greatest level of need within the school, getting access to the greatest level of support. Okay. And then I suppose just being really mindful when you're thinking about SNA support for your own children. How can I achieve greater independence? And I suppose what is the role of the SNA? And I suppose this is just that little cartoon to kind of think about it, that's sticking like glue, that is, there doesn't need to be somebody maybe velcroed to a child all the time, and the impact that can have on self-esteem, the impact it can have on the child developing independence, developing relationships, all of that. And where is their role? Are they supporting some of the times? Are they supporting from afar? Are they there to see the child can do it and assist where needed? But really important around that SNA access. What is the role of the SNA? They're working on targets and targeted interventions and targeted support where needed. And then where the child doesn't need it, they're able to step back and allow the child to develop that independence piece. Okay, Sarah.
Okay, everybody. So I'm just going to jump back in here now and speak to the new circular. So Circular 80, 2024, forward planning for special education provision. So I suppose this circular was released, and I suppose it's been one that we've been talking with the Department of Education about for quite a while now, in order to support us in improving special class planning processes. So while we have always, as I referenced earlier, we've always gathered information, and we've always, from engagement with families, and predicted, I suppose, additional requirement beyond the I suppose the demand that was known to us through parent contact. We were still in a position where each year there was a significant number of places in classes that we had opened that went to children who were unknown to NCSE. And while those children absolutely need and deserve those places, it made it very, very difficult from the point of view of planning, because where there were across some counties, the number out of the number of places that we created, there was up to 72% of children who took places in those classes were unknown to NCSE at the point at which they were offered and accepted the place in the class. And like I said, that's not a problem from the point of view that they were children who had the requisite I suppose, recommendations, and they needed those places in those classes. But it was difficult from the point of view of us not knowing that those children were out there, in order to have a clear overview of what the demand for the special classes were. So what was happening was we were opening what we believed was enough places, plus 30 to 50% additional places than what we believed we needed, and oftentimes finding quite late in the year that that wasn't going to meet the need in the area. And so we engaged with the Department of Education in respect of how can we improve the data that we gather? How can we improve the process for parents as well, so that parents who are applying and getting offered places in these classes aren't then finding out that they don't, that the child's reports don't meet criteria for placement in the class, and after finding out that they've been offered a placement, later finding out that there needs to be changes, addendums to reports, or that the report doesn't meet criteria at all, and in order to avoid the stress of that for families. And so this circular, the seed for this circular was planted at that point. And ourselves and the Department of Education started working on how we could improve forward planning and how we could improve that process for parents. And so what has resulted now is Circular 80/2024. What this circular allows us to do is have access to schools' waiting lists so that we are aware of the children that are on schools' waiting lists seeking specialist placement. Before, I suppose, the schools, there were at times concerns from a GDPR perspective from schools about sharing their waiting lists with us. But now when you apply to a school, it'll be clearly identified that NCSE can request information on the waiting list for the schools. So if there's waiting lists for autism classes, we now have access to that information. We also now have access to further information as well in respect of children who are currently attending mainstream, who for whatever reason have reached a point in their educational journey where it may be now that they require the support of an autism class. And schools, I suppose, now have to tell us that they have a child within their mainstream who is now seeking a placement within a specialist provision, be that into a special class or into special school. And that gives us a lot more information than we would have previously had in respect of if we open a class in St. Mary's, are we going to have all of those 6 places for the parents who are known to us who are seeking placement for September 2025? Or are we going to have 3 of those places because there's 3 children within that school community who now require that placement in that school? So it's opening up the amount of data that we have available to us and the amount of information that we have available to us in order to plan and prepare for provision for the coming year. What it also does now is request that parents notify us formally that they are seeking a special class or special school placement for your child prior to the 1st of February on the year in which you were seeking placement. So if you're starting September of 2025, that we know by February of 2025 that you are seeking a specialist placement for that year. So the way in which that we are doing that now is through our parents notify process. So we will issue you a letter confirming that your child's report meets the eligibility criteria once you have contacted us through Parents Notify. The purpose of that is to speed up the process in respect of when you're applying to schools. At the point at which you apply, the school knows and you know that your child meets criteria for the placement that you're applying for. What it gives us is information on the number of families who are seeking school places so that we can work to make sure that there are sufficient places available for you for the coming year. So the letters really serve the purpose of providing you as a parent or guardian early clarity on your child's eligibility for a special class or special school placement. The letter for special school placement, I suppose there's a small caveat to it in the sense that it must be read in tandem with the designation of the special school. So for example, if your child has a diagnosis of autism and complex needs and you're applying to a special school for children with autism and complex needs, then that's absolutely fine. Your letter, though, won't specify what type of special school you're applying for. So when we say that it must be read in tandem with the designation of the special school, what we mean is that we're giving you a letter to say that your child meets the eligibility criteria for a special school. However, in the context of your child with a diagnosis of autism and complex needs, it's for that designation of school. It doesn't apply to schools with differing designations, so schools for children with moderate intellectual disability or schools for children with physical disability, unless your child has those diagnoses also. The letter is not a guarantee of a placement, but confirms your child's eligibility to be placed in a special class or a special school. The information that we get when you notify us that your child is seeking placement allows us to work to ensure that there will be a placement there for your child. The letter doesn't replace standard applications to schools for placement, but it can accompany and should accompany an application to a special class or special school. The letter does not indicate eligibility for school transport. A separate application is made to the school on behalf of the parent or guardian to the SENO at a later point in time. So just to clarify that, your child will be eligible for school transport for school, provided that they're going to the closest school to their home that has an available placement. So if your child is going to a school that isn't the closest school to your home, but the school that is closest to your home doesn't have an available placement, then they will be eligible for transport. If they're going beyond the closest school, but the closest school does have a placement, then they won't be eligible for transport. So it's just really to clarify that the letter doesn't indicate eligibility for transport. It just indicates eligibility for placement in a special class or special school. Sorry, no. Now, I suppose this is an area that we really want to provide clarity on, because we do feel that there has been some confusion and some uncertainty around this area, and so this process, it doesn't alter the admissions processes for schools. It doesn't change the Admissions Act. It doesn't change anything about how schools proceed through their admissions and enrolment processes. Schools can and they should be continuing to run their waiting lists, and parents and guardians should not be precluded from waiting lists or placement offers on the basis of this circular and whether or not they yet have their letter confirming the child's eligibility. And that's really key for you as parents, because at the moment, a lot of schools have their enrollments open or running, or have just completed their enrollments, and no schools, your child shouldn't be disadvantaged at this stage by not having the letter from the NCSE. We will get you the letter when you come through the parents notify, but the schools should be continuing to waitlist your child or to offer places in line with their enrolment policies in the interim. So school places continue to be offered in alignment with schools' admissions notices and policies, and NCSE letters of eligibility have been introduced in order to support parents and schools, but should not inhibit a school's admissions process. Schools that have already commenced their admissions processes should continue to accept their applications and apply their admissions policy to each. If a school receives an application that doesn't have an NCSE letter confirming eligibility, and if the school is unclear as to whether the report is eligible, they can, with your consent as a parent, request that the report is forwarded to their local SENO in order to verify the eligibility, and that won't be a problem. Having the letter is a measure to assist, and it shouldn't be a determining factor in the offering of placement to applicants. And we are going to be issuing a direct correspondence to all schools nationwide to ensure this is clarified. But if you're having any difficulties at all with this as part of the process over the coming weeks, please do feel free to reach out to us and we can provide you with information and support, or we can make sure that we're clarifying the situation with schools. That correspondence, we hope, is going to be ready to go later this week to all schools. So just for yourselves as parents, and for those of you who maybe haven't yet gone through this process, when you go to our website, so this is our landing page on our website, we've frozen this tile here into the center of the website page so that it's as easily accessible for families as it can be. If you click into that tile on our website, you will then be brought to this page, and this page outlines the process from start to finish. So just so that everybody, I suppose, is clear, what we have is two slightly different processes. So we have this process. If you have not been in touch with your local SENO at all to date, then you can complete the consent form, which is linked below. So this little section here is actually at the bottom of this page. I just had to break them up to fit them all on. So this little section here, you'll be able to find the consent form and information on how to submit the consent form and your child's report to the NCSE. So you'll be able to download that, complete it, and then attach it to an email alongside your child's report and send that email to parentsnotify@ncsc.ie. When you do that, you will get an automatic response from that website address confirming that your child's report or that your email has been received. Following on from that, we have a team working there and they will just review the email. They'll make sure that what's required is there. So they'll make sure that your child's report is provided and that the consent form is completed. That team then forward it to the local team for the area in which you live. So if you are living in Leitrim, they'll forward it to the Leitrim team. And the Leitrim team will then reach out to you directly in order to provide you with the letter confirming your child's eligibility for special class or special school. At the moment, since the circular has been released, there's been a large number of parents contacting Parents Notify, and so there are some small delays with getting the emails out to everywhere that they need to be and getting the letters out to parents. So I suppose just to reiterate that shouldn't stop any parent from applying to school places that they're interested in, and it shouldn't disadvantage any parent or child in the process of applying for a place while you wait for that letter. So continue to do that and the letter will come. We're working through them as quickly as we can. What we have done, I suppose, is if you have been in contact with your SENO prior to the circular being released, then you can contact the SENO that you were in touch with directly and they'll be able to provide you with the letter. There is no need to go through this centralized Parents Notify process. The SENO will make sure that the information is recorded in the same way and make sure that you get the letter. Equally, where there may be, I suppose, challenges in relation to accessing the internet or accessing our website or getting the report or the consent form sent to us digitally, you can also contact your local SENO directly and request that they send you a copy of the consent form, and they will do that, and then you can post back to them the completed consent form and a copy of your child's report. So if there are issues or difficulties in accessing the website to go through the process digitally, there is the option to go directly to your SENO who will support you to do the process in a more manual way. And now we are just on time for some questions. So I think Niamh and Michael are going to guide us through the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much to Sarah and Stephanie. That was really comprehensive. We have a minimum of 50 questions that have come in via the chat and Q&A. So I'm going to jump straight into the questions so that we can get through as many as we can. I'm actually just going to take the first question, which is what happens if the support plan includes ABA or similar behavioural practices and the parents are against them. So, there is significant evidence now to indicate that any type of compliance-based method does not have positive long-term or indeed short-term consequences for the autistic child. The statement around ABA is available on the AsIAm website, but I would feel that it would be reasonable for you to share some of this evidence with the school and raise your concerns around that. I know that a lot of parents do experience this, and many parents that I have spoken to have, and not that this should be the parents' responsibility, but have educated the school on, the reality of those practices and the knowledge base we now have about them. And do feel free also to contact the information line if you need support on that. And we will give the details of the information line at the end of the session. But thank you for, I suppose, raising that issue as well.
Niamh, we might just mention as well, just in respect of that query, NCSE have a new support document that's coming out for schools in the next couple of weeks. It's called NCSE Relate, and it is a purely, I suppose, relationships based approach to supporting children within schools, and all, I suppose, all aspects or any information in it go completely in the opposite direction to ABA. And so if there is, I suppose, that if that's coming up as a concern for families, once that document is released, if families want to get in touch, we'll be able to provide a link to that document so that they can share it with the schools as well, or we can share it with the schools. It'll be sent to every school anyway, but that moves very, very clearly away from any ABA practices. And so it would be a good support from an NCSE perspective for families and schools, hopefully. And we are hoping that that is being released, I think, Stephanie, if I'm not mistaken, in December sometime, although we don't have a firm date on it yet.
Yeah. And I suppose just to say that the NCSE do not endorse, recommend, discuss any ABA practices as part of any support. There are historical, I suppose, documents that were out there that maybe had token economy and some interventions maybe that were, I suppose, ABA, but just to say the current practice within the NCSE is not to endorse or recommend any ABA, and any of them documents now are not shared with schools or not available via the NCSE.
Thank you, Sarah and Stephanie. We have a question that's come in around school curriculum. So if a parent is concerned that the school, curriculum that's being offered in a special school, for example, around maths for an autistic child with an intellectual disability, where would they raise the concern that the curriculum the child isn't able to access the curriculum, which, we know is a constitutional right as well? Who would they flag that to?
I suppose in the first instance, they would go to the class teacher, have that conversation with them. Every child that's in a special school or in a special class automatically should have a support plan. So I suppose as part of that support planning meeting, it may be a good idea to have that conversation. If you've had that conversation with the school and you feel you're not getting anywhere, you can link in with the inspectorate. There's an inspector. Every school has an inspector, and I suppose their role is to ensure quality teaching and learning. And if you have a query around that, you can link in directly with your inspector if you're not having any, I suppose, success with trying to get that message across at school level. So if you go onto the department page, they have oversight, I suppose, as I said, for ensuring quality teaching and learning and the needs of your child are met. So I would say that would be a good place to go, would be to the inspector. I mean, you can also write to the board of management of the school. Each board has a parents rep as well on the board, so it might be a good idea if you before going to the inspector, to also link in with the parents rep on the board of management, or to make contact with the board of management, request a meeting with the board in relation to your concerns, because they have that, I suppose, management role as well within the school.
Great, thank you so much. In relation to the school support plan, how often can a parent expect that to be reviewed?
The support plan should be, I suppose, the absolute longest that a support plan should be in place with that review is 1 year. But best practice would say that you would be reviewing that every term. It mightn't be that full formal assessment piece, but really the support plan is a working document. It should be under review. If a child meets a target that was set in September and by Christmas they've met that target, you don't wait until the review meeting in February to change that target. You know, you update the target and you move on to a different priority. So at the absolute longest, I suppose, there should be a formal meeting where the full plan is reviewed, the assessment piece is reviewed, the targets are all reviewed once a year. But that really at any stage, a teacher should have that support plan as a working document, and as targets are achieved, it's updated. And then that, I suppose, a parent can link in, like you'll have that target, you'll have the targets on the support plan. So at any stage, you should be able to link in with a school and say, look, they've achieved this target now, or something has happened and now what was a priority 3 months ago is no longer a priority and we need to focus on something different. So it definitely should be a working document, but parents should at least expect once a year, but really best practice would be that it would be much more often than that.
Great, thank you so much. In terms of the SNA hours, and I know we talked about the model in terms of, it's not that an SNA is assigned to a specific child, or a child has an SNA for the whole of the time they're in school, etc. But is it possible for a parent to find out how many SNA hours are allocated to their child?
Absolutely. A school should be sharing that information with a parent. The parent should be able to, I suppose, indicate that when they feel that their child needs support in particular when they're engaging with the school, but the school should absolutely be making it clear to parents, you know, your child has access to this SNA. It averages about this time per day. These are the times in the day where we feel that your child needs it most, that this is when we give them access. They're actually really independent with X, Y, or Z. So they don't have SNA access while that's going on, and we're promoting their independence, and that information should be shared with parents. And again, it can come through those planning meetings, but also just ad hoc as things change or things the child gains independence, or if something happens that the child needs more support for a period of time, that's constantly being reviewed and the parents are being kept abreast of everything that's going on in respect of that.
And every SNA within the working in a school has a timetable, and that timetable should signpost to who they're working with, whether it's an individual child or a group of children throughout the day. So any principal has access to that and can quantify that for any parent that needs it or should be able to.
Thank you. If a parent has, been told there isn't sufficient SNA allocation for your child, and they inquire to say, around an exceptional review, would it be possible for the school to apply for an SNA hours, and the school informs the parents, no, we're not going to do that, or your child doesn't require an SNA? What rights or steps should a parent take in that instance?
I suppose really, like, SNA access should be evidence-based. So there should be evidence to say, this is why we deem your child to need SNA access, or this is why we deem your child to not. So if a school is saying to you, we don't believe your child needs SNA access for the full day, they have to evidence that. So they have evidence to say the child is accessing the curriculum independently, the child is able to access the environment independently, the child is, regulated and ready to learn. So I suppose they have to evidence and show you that they have, because that may be the case, but maybe the child is different at school than they are at home, or whatever that might be. So I think it's really important that if they're saying to you that they don't need full-time SNA access, that they can evidence that for you. And I suppose it's within any parent's right to kind of ask for that evidence, right? What's happening when the child doesn't have SNA access, and are they accessing the curriculum? I suppose if the school then will still not apply for SNA access, you can still, like, you can go, as I said, to the inspectorate, you can go to the board of management. They have that overall remit. But I think it's starting with that initial conversation and the principal or this class teacher evidence and showing you why they believe that the child doesn't need that full-time access.
Okay, thank you. There's a query, and I imagine you're going to say to contact the SENO, but where in post-primary, a parent's child was enrolled in a special class, but now when they've inquired, it seems that the child isn't in that class and is actually permanently in mainstream with SNA. So even though they were enrolled in the special class, they don't seem to be in a position where they're accessing it. Would their next steps be to contact the SENO to raise that?
Yeah, so I suppose in this, there's a couple of things, Niamh. I think first and foremost, a conversation with the school is always a good place to start as to what's the reasoning and behind the child not being accessing the autism class and being in mainstream all day. There is a practice piece, I suppose, just there in some schools as well, with post-primary schools in particular, where it's the utilization of the autism classes and how it's worked. Sometimes they need a little bit of support with that, so they can absolutely contact their local SENO, and if that's something that we can support with the school, then we will do what we can in that respect. The main thing is, I suppose, is just to start the conversations with both ourselves and the school in respect of, what's going on. Why is there a reason why the child isn't in the the young person isn't in the autism class at all? Is there, as Stephanie had said, what's the evidence that supports that child or young person, spending the majority of the day or all of their day in mainstream? And if the child or young person needs the autism class, then starting that conversation with the school as to, we enrolled here to attend the autism class because that's what our child or young person needs in order to support them to attend school. And so we want to talk about how we can make that happen. And then equally, as I said, engaging with us, and we'll support where we can in respect of that.
Great.
And I think too, just in relation to that as well, I suppose the reason why autism classes are opened in mainstream schools is that the young people have as many opportunities to meaningfully work and socialize alongside their peers. And I suppose it may not, where they may have initially enrolled in the autism class, it may be a very positive thing that they're able to spend a significant proportion of the day in the mainstream class, but it's about, I suppose, having that conversation to say, well, what does the day look like for them when they're in the mainstream class? If they're accessing the curriculum, if they're regulated and, as I said, access and learning, then maybe it's about having that review piece and go back and say, okay, initially, maybe the special class was the most inclusive place so my child could access learning. But now, as a result of interventions and support that's available in mainstream, maybe now the mainstream is the most inclusive place. Sometimes that's not always the negative thing, that it's about having that conversation to find out, okay, maybe, things have changed and the learning environment is, really supporting my child as a learner, and the mainstream class may be the best place. So I think it's that initial conversation with the school is really important to find out what's happening and why it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd hate to think of if a place isn't being used or isn't needed, and another family could be kind of in that class as well, and not being held. There's a few questions that have come in, and this comes to AsIAm a lot as well, in terms of the wording that's required on the report or letter to recommend, be that an autism class or a special school for a child. And I know this is an area where there can be kind of word of mouth on what's required, what people maybe hear but isn't necessarily stated. So is there a document that parents can access which sets out, the wording that's required in those reports? So one thing that comes up a lot is if it says Niamh would benefit from an autism class, that, parents will be told that wording isn't strong enough, and that they'll have better results if it says it's essential or it's required. But I suppose to prevent that back and forth, is there guidance available for parents to know, the wording that's required by the professional, if the professional feels that that is the appropriate recommendation, so that they don't fall into that trap of being informed that the report isn't sufficient or doesn't give the information required.
Yeah. So I suppose on that one, it isn't, I suppose it's written in our guidelines for schools in respect of special classes that there needs to be a very definite recommendation. It's not that I can think of off the top of my head written anywhere formally in respect of circulars or anything like that. But I suppose the reason for it is that it's a safeguard really from the point of view of making sure that a child is going to the most inclusive placement possible, and where wording like may benefit or could benefit or might benefit from access to an autism class, we have to, I suppose, query we could argue that most or all children with autism could benefit from access to an autism class at times during the day. And I suppose it's why we need more definite and explicit language in respect of, this child absolutely requires that class for the majority of their day at this point in time. And that can change. Children change and grow all the time, and it can go both ways. Like there can be children who are absolutely managing really well in mainstream, and then circumstances change for them or something changes and they need a little bit of extra support. So I suppose the reasoning for the language piece being the way it is just to make sure that we're ensuring that children are getting the opportunity to go to the most inclusive placement possible. What I would say is that we do have a working agreement with NEPs, and we meet with CDNTs regularly from those two perspectives, where we do make it really clear to them what the requirements are. And what I would say is, for everybody who's here today, it is that this child requires a placement, or it's essential that this child is placed in that's the kind of language that's required at the moment. Now, I say that at the moment because we are also cognizant of the fact that we would like to move to a more needs-based way of working, and there's a lot of things that and policy within the Department of Education that has to be reviewed in order for us to do that. So at the moment, that is the language that's required. And if there's any uncertainty, I suppose there shouldn't be for the most part with CDNT or NEPs, because we are working with them to make sure they're clear on what's required from an education point of view. But it's where if there's private psychologists involved, we can provide clarification for families and for the psychologists if they contact us directly.
Great. And I think that's what comes up a lot, because the majority of families that we work with, due to waiting list, have had to access their report privately. And from a therapist perspective, we're almost trained to say we'll benefit from, and not to nail to the mast. So I think that can sometimes come from therapist training as well. It can be the private piece that picks up. And there's just
Sarah, can I just come in just to kind of add to that question, Niamh? So, and just for our attendees, so just for clarification, so if, for example, the letter from the NCSE states that the report doesn't meet the particular language or criteria referenced in the circular as such, the parent can still apply for a kind of an autism class or a special school.
They can, I suppose they can still apply. Getting in place though, because when the report goes through the school, first of all, most of the schools will know very well and in detail what the criteria is, and they may not even progress an application if they know it's not going to meet criteria. But what a school should do in that instant is let a family know, so that they can go and they can seek an addendum, or they can seek support on having the report or the wording changed. If they do get some schools will push them through, and they might get to the point of notification of enrolment to NCSE, and I suppose the report comes to us then, and if it doesn't meet criteria, then then you're seeking addendum at that point. So while they can apply, what I would recommend for families to do is to check with your local SENO before, like apply to schools, absolutely start, don't wait, but check with your local SENO about the wording in your report, see if there's something that needs to be looked at or that won't meet criteria so that you're ahead of it. And again, this circular is supporting us with that as well, because what we're now asking is that parents come to us through the Parents Notify. So we'll see your report so we can indicate to you early on in the process that that wording doesn't quite meet the criteria that's set out in policy at the moment. This is what needs to be there, or this is what needs to be changed. And just to be clear as well, at no point will we suggest that, or any of our SENOs suggest that a parent should seek an addendum unless it's, something that the psychologist and that the parent and everybody who's involved in that child's team are willing to stand over as a recommendation. We're not going to say to a parent, you need to get the report changed to get this placement, because it's not for us to decide the kind of placement that your child needs. That's the professional team and I suppose yourselves as parents and families. So what we will suggest to you is if this is the type of placement that is needed and required for your child, then this is what the recommendation needs to say.
Great. And there's also
I've just shared there from that the circular 8024, just that eligibility criteria that was outlined from the department. So I suppose this is what SENOs will be looking to when they're sent the letter around eligibility. So it's that diagnosis first, the demonstration of the understanding of the complexity of the child's overall level of needs, evidence in the professional report. So they're not just going to go to the last line of the report around the recommendation, they're going to look to the body of that report and look at the overall profile of the child. And then I suppose it says a clear professional recommendation as to what educational placement type would be most appropriate. I think that's really important, as opposed to benefit from. What is the most appropriate to best meet the child's needs, along with the rationale for same. So I suppose that's what the department have outlined as the criteria for eligibility in the circular, and I suppose that's what you're working towards, them three components. So just to share that for parents' reference as well.
Thank you so much. In terms of, and this comes to us a lot as well, so parents will be told, that recommendation is too old. So if it was a recommendation that was made when the child was in junior infants and now they're applying for a secondary school place, so people are asking, I suppose, of the length of the eligibility of that report, and when they would need to get that recommendation reviewed. When might it time out, for want of a better phrasing?
So I suppose that is a really critical question, Niamh, to be honest. Any guidance and policy and information that we have, it just states that the report must be recent. I suppose there's a number of schools out there that would have 2 years written into their enrolment policies, and it's difficult for us to challenge on that because the schools are bound by their enrolment policies, but we won't stick rigidly to 2 years. So we're not going to take in a report that's only 3 years old and say absolutely no way. Where we would have concern is when a child was last assessed when they're 3 and they're now 12, and that's only because we have consideration to give to the fact that children grow and change over time, and that the child that was assessed at 3 years old and was recommended a placement at 3 years old is a very different child to the child that's sitting in front of us at 12. And so really where we want to see a change in the recommendation is at that point, certainly, where a child is, transitioning into post-primary, where there's an updated recommendation that either, states that this child now needs to continue into an autism class at post-primary school if it was an autism class at primary school they were in, or maybe it's time to go back to mainstream, or maybe now it's time to consider a special school place. So it's at that point really where we need to see it. I suppose another point at which we might need to see it, and again, it's not something we would So if a child has gone into junior infants and goes all the way to sixth class in the one school, we would hope that the school is going to review the child's placement and consider whether or not the child is ready for mainstreaming at many different points along their journey in their 8 years at primary school. At the point of which a child maybe moves schools, and this is not from the point of view of moving from a junior national school to a senior national school, because at that point, if a child was going to a vertical school, they'd just continue through. So we're not going to, and we've made that clear to our teams that nobody should be requested to have an updated report if a family are attending a school that happens to be split in two as a junior national and a senior national. But I suppose it may be that if a child gets to fourth or fifth or sixth class and is moving school for whatever reason, that then maybe the updated recommendation may be of benefit at that point, because we need to consider again that that's now a 9 or 10-year-old child who was last assessed at 3, and is that still an appropriate recommendation for that child? So I suppose you'll see 2 years thrown about and bandied about out there. You'll see it in schools enrollment policies, but really we work to recent, and we are as flexible as we can be within that. And our main concern is not basing a decision on a child based on a report that was done 10, 11 years ago.
Thank you. And I know some parents I've spoken to recently have raised the assessment of need process for that review as well. There's a couple of questions just on, I imagine, parents who are new to NCSE, just a little bit of confusion on if their child doesn't yet have a school place and they're based in the location of Rathgar in Dublin, and then they're looking of what SENO to contact, but it doesn't necessarily mean that their child will go to school in Rathgar. Do they make contact with the SENO that is located to their home address? And likewise, if a parent lives in Cork, but for the obvious reasons their child, because there hasn't been a school place, is being educated in Kerry, they would contact the Kerry SENO. So just a little bit of confusion around the home address versus the school address if you don't have a school address, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So if your child is not yet in school, your home address. So you contact the SENO if you're living in Rathgar, the SENO for the Rathgar area. If your child is in a school away from your home address, the SENO for the school is probably the best SENO to contact. Our SENOs will all work together as well. So if there is, for example, a reason why maybe your child is in a school in Kerry and you're trying to move them back to a school in Cork, it may be that you contact the SENO for the school your child is in Kerry to say that you're seeking a placement closer to home in Cork, and they'll link you with the SENO in Cork, or they'll engage with the SENO in Cork to get support. So we will work together across those boundaries. But really, as a rule of thumb, if your child is not in school, the SENO for your local area. If your child is in school, the SENO for the school.
Great. Thank you.
And just if you look on the NCSE website and you see that there may be, because of the number of schools in Rathgar, just for example, there may be 2 SENOs covering Rathgar because there's that, there's 50 schools, just for example, just link in with one of them, just pick one of them, and if they're not directly for your area, they'll put you in touch with the right person. Or also the team manager for that area in Dublin, link in directly with them either. So if you're not sure what SENO to link in with, just send an email to the team manager and they'll point you in the right direction either.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of questions just on where people have applied and they're awaiting the letter of placement, how long that they roughly should expect to wait, if that makes sense.
At the moment, I think it is. It depends on really what county you're in, to be honest, because obviously the likes of Dublin are getting a lot more requests for letters. I think they are moving. Generally, it's not taking much more than 2 working weeks, so 10 working days. We will speed that up and things will even out. There's just been an initial influx. That's in busy areas. If you're in a smaller county or a county where there isn't as high a population or lower demand, it's much faster than that at the moment. So if you haven't heard back, I suppose within 10 working days, a good point of contact would be to the local team manager for the county that you're living in, because they will be able to check if they have already received the email and shared it out to the SENO and the SENO's getting to you, or if they haven't yet received it. And that will kind of give you an idea if it's come through the team manager already, you're probably closer to getting it. If they haven't yet received it, it might be another 5 days or so from there.
Okay,
It was just the timeline for what happens. So first of all, it goes to into the parents notify inbox. They're worked through, so there could be hundreds of them coming in a day. They then have to go back to you, maybe where they need additional information, or they have to ensure they have the consent and the full reports. They then have to send it to the team manager. The team manager then has to go through it and decide which SENO it goes to. Then it goes to the SENO, and the SENO then has to get to read the reports and write the letter. So within all that, there's a lot of moving parts. So I suppose everyone is working through it as quickly as they can, but just a good few people have the eyes on it before eventually it gets to the stage where you receive the letter.
And just as an indicative number, the first weekend that was live on our website, we received about 1,000 emails in. So it was heavy in the beginning, it eased off a bit, and it's picked up a bit again now. So the process is also a very new process, and we'll improve it over the next couple of years. But for now, I suppose just bear with us. And if there are any issues or you feel like it's been far too long, just get in touch and we'll figure it out.
Okay, in terms then, I know we're just going slightly over time, but in terms of if a child is on a waiting list for an autism class in a school, what happens then in terms of special education hours if a child is on a waiting list? Is it a given that they would, get set hours while they're on that waiting list, or how do the two marry, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing is that where there may be a number of children on a waiting list for a school, the NCSE would try to work with that school to maybe open an additional class if that was an option. If there was if there was accommodation available, or if the school are willing to, and all that. So I suppose where we would try to work with the school to ensure that everybody that was looking for a place had one where that was feasible. In the interim, I suppose, where they're supported in mainstream, where we know there was a child that was made, that was known to the NCSE that was seeking a special class place and maybe didn't get one in the school that they were looking for one, then there is additional supports that can be made available. So additional SNA support can be made available, additional SET support can be made available if the school don't feel they have enough within their allocation. So they are supported. They still have an identified need. They still have a support plan. They still access SET. There should be still accessing SET and SNA support in the mainstream.
Absolutely. Okay. A couple of questions have just come through on masking as well, particularly for autistic girls.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot in terms of, a child, and parents who know me on the call will know I always say this in terms of, imploding at school, exploding at home, and the impact then of that, I suppose, on the family and the family well-being as well. And we would always talk about the use of the support plan and the child's diagnostic report there, because the report will indicate a social communication difference, and that's not something you're inventing. That is officially reported there by the professional, and that, as well as the sensory overwhelm, and the social isolation, will often be some of those reasons for masking. But I know that parents can feel very, very demotivated when, they're told, well, she's grand here in school, is there any problems at home, or so on. And we would usually advise around using the support plan there to evidence a need for the reasonable accommodations. And we would take the point of view that if a child is concentrating so hard on masking, and they're not accessing the curriculum, they don't have the same cognitive capacity available to learn if they're focusing on suppressing stims or saying the right thing. So it's as much of a special educational need as anything else. Just because a child isn't breaking a window or so on doesn't mean that they're not struggling in class. But in terms of, from an NCSE point of view, where a parent might feel that masking isn't being taken seriously by the school, what might you suggest, in terms of steps that they could take?
I suppose a big piece around masking is school's understanding that masking, you know, is actually something that's real and is happening. And I suppose when the NCSE would, any of our teacher professional learning seminars that we would have, we would always discuss masking, and we would always advise is that, you know, what happens at school impacts what happens at home, and what happens at home impacts what happens at school. They're not two, we don't have two different children. We have the same child managing two different environments. So I suppose that's really important, is that education piece, that it may be good to suggest that they engage with an NCSE advisor. An NCSE advisor can go out and talk to them around why that child can be why that child is masking. And I suppose the evidence of that is what you see at home, that it's about talking to the school and seeing, right, maybe if we, you know, try more predictability within the day, will that support regulation? Maybe if we try more whole class, you know, movement and sensory input, and consider the learning environment, maybe that will make a difference. So I suppose it's really around requesting with the school to put in some whole class, I suppose, interventions or environmental changes maybe that will be benefit everybody, but maybe really necessary for your child. So I suppose it's really about just explaining to them, and so they understand what masking is. They can access advisor support or teacher professional learning around it. And I suppose it's around that support plan as well. It's and for some autistic learners, the school might say to you, well, they don't need a support plan. We don't see any identified need here. But I suppose what's really important is that parent voice and that pupil voice. And what have they done within the school to capture that pupil voice? That, you know, that's really important, and how they facilitate that. So I suppose it's about open up that conversation to capture pupil voice, capture parent voice, request that the school maybe make some changes, it says that'll benefit everybody but may be necessary for your child. And then it's about you reporting back to see, right, when that mask comes off at home, is it to the same extent as it was prior to some predictability, or whatever the interventions maybe that might be needed to support your child. And I suppose it's really having that conversation too with the school around what helps your child at home. Like, so you can say, well, at home, they need predictability. They need to know when we're going somewhere. They need to know who's going to be there. They need to have access to quiet time. They need to have access to structured, you know, tasks, so they know the steps in a task. So it's about, this is what they need at home, and this is what supports them at home. And then how can they maybe bring that into school that'll support the child not to have to keep that mask on all day.
Thank you. We're just coming up to 10 minutes over time, so I better leave it there, but I'll hand over to Michael to close out the session.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie and Sarah. I suppose a reflection on tonight is the number of questions that have come in. So obviously people are very curious and engaged with the circular. And as Niamh was putting questions to yourselves, I was answering some in the chat as well. But there are probably a number of questions that are still outstanding, and we might link in with you guys on some of those outstanding questions in the next day or so, and we can bring some clarity to some of the questions that we didn't get around to tonight. But I suppose just to close out the session, I just want to thank you both for taking the time, and to our parents and guardians who took the time this evening to listen in and get a full sense of the role and the remit of the NCSE, the role of the SENO, and I suppose just getting clarity on that circular, which I think is obviously very important for families on the call. So I'm going to stop the recording.